All right. So thank you for joining. Feel free to turn on your cameras and audio later on. I'll be asking questions and we'll be able to get to know each other. But first, I'm going to start out with a little presentation, tell you about myself, a little bit about my life story, and then we'll be able to chat. So this is me and my family. On the left is me with my cat Leo. He's my best friend. I consider him my brother. And then in the middle here is my family. So my dad Terry on the left, he's the treasurer of XLA Life. My mother and my sister is on my right. Well, on my left in the photo. So a little bit about myself. I'm 25 years old. I was diagnosed with XLA at 3.5 years old. After a couple bouts of pneumonia, I went through the long, tumultuous diagnostic odyssey that a lot of us XLA patients and families have to go through. I went to McGill University and I studied immunology and microbiology. I graduated in 2019. And some fun facts about myself: I caught a home run at a Mets game, which is, I consider, the highlight of my life. And I was a geography whiz. They used to call me the whiz. I went to the state finals in New York for the geography B, which isn't the most common B there is, but just goes to show that I'm a bit of a nerd and I like knowledge and knowing things. And that's highlighted by my research. So after McGill, I went to the NIH, where I was in a lab with Dr. Luigi Notarangelo, who is big in SCID, so severe combined immune deficiency. He was a big leader in that and T-cell biology. But I wanted to focus on XLA, better understand B cells, better understand how it might affect my life. So the top article here is my first paper that I was a lead author on. And it had to do with BTK inhibitors, which is a class of drugs typically used for lymphomas that inhibit BTK, which is what us XLA patients are deficient in. So it kind of mimics XLA in that sense. And you can go find that paper online. And there are some other ones that I've thrown in here, including this paper on a rare complication called NRH in XLA. But you can find all those online, and I'm happy to share and talk about more of my research later. But then after my time at the NIH and my research, I wanted to start something bigger, a little more community-based. And so I started XLA Life. So why XLA Life? Well, XLA was discovered in 1952. It was the first genetically identified immune deficiency, and treatment hasn't really changed all that much since then. Also, 1 in 2 rare diseases lack a dedicated patient advocacy group. There are over 7,000 rare diseases, and I think every single one should have a patient advocacy group uniting the community. Researchers really like having a patient advocacy group that can help them understand what priorities are, what people need. And XLA is often underrepresented, not only in research, but also in places like the Immune Deficiency Foundation, where we're outnumbered by CVID quite often. And so we have to unite and advocate for ourselves. And so I figured this would be the best place to start. And so our mission statement is to foster the unification and empowerment of the global XLA community through education, advocacy, and initiatives aimed to improve the overall quality of life for those affected by XLA. And that I really want to emphasize for all those affected by XLA, because it is a family affair. It goes beyond the family, friends, teachers. It affects everything from work and school, and even your local physician. They might not really understand XLA. And so it's important for us to advocate and educate all those involved. And our goal is to improve XLA lives. And so the 3 main questions we aim to answer: how many people are affected by XLA worldwide, and how are people affected differently in different countries? We're not a monolith. We want to know how it might be different across the world. We also want to identify the best way to improve quality of life. We know age of diagnosis is a big one there. And actually this morning, the European Society for Immune Deficiencies had a really big webinar on investigating the feasibility of XLA on newborn screening panels, which I will get into in the next slide, I believe. And we also want to come up with community-based initiatives that are effective and that can be replicated into other rare diseases. As I mentioned, I think every rare disease should have its own patient advocacy group. So we want to come up with things that can be easily translated and replicated into those other rare diseases. So here are some notes from ESID's Stop XLA webinar from this morning. Basically, the main topics they hit: is it cost effective to do so? And it was a poll question actually, and most researchers, I think the percent was like 71%, answered it would be cost effective and worthwhile. Another key point, a doctor from London was talking about XLA beyond the B cell. He used the word, he used the question basically, is XLA a combined immune deficiency? And what that means is how many fronts does BTK deficiency affect? It's not just the B cell. We know BTK is important in macrophages and neutrophils, but we don't know how BTK deficiency really affects those cells. They also mentioned that, so we know age of diagnosis is a key factor in quality of life, but we haven't seen the age of diagnosis decreasing in recent years, which is a problem. It's still hovering around 2 or 3 years old. We really need to get it down to hopefully within the first 6 months of life, because your maternal antibodies from birth start to wane really within 6 weeks, and then they're almost negligible at 6 to 9 months. So really, if we can catch XLA in that window before the maternal antibodies from birth disappear, then we can really be effective in treating and preventing those early pneumonias and invasive infections that do lots of damage. And another point that all 3 of the speakers at this webinar really hammered is we need more studies and we need more subjects. So I really hope we can unite the patient community, get more people into registries such as the US Immune Deficiency Network, and as well as if you're in Europe, the European Immune Deficiency Network. So that's a little SparkNote version of the ESID Stop XLA webinar from this morning. I'll be reaching out to those researchers and hoping that we can also get them into chats like this, because I do want to have guest speakers and make this a real community effort with researchers as well.